Hi there, this is Mark Schiff of the podcast You Don't Know Schiff, and it's great to be here. And today, with my co-host Lowell Benjamin, we are having on a very special guest. And I don't know what to tell you. I'm just going to say the name, Phil Rosenthal. Phil Rosenthal is arguably not only one of the funniest people alive, one of the happiest people alive, one of the most talented showrunner people that ever existed. With Everyone Knows Raymond, we talk about that, and we talk a little about food. But most of all, this is one of the great conversations, one of the greatest conversations I've ever had about comedy.
Yeah. And first of all, everyone will hear it in the episode, but Phil is one of the nicest, most effusive, loving people you will ever get the chance to hear. So that was really fun.
By the way,
And
he's replaced you
oh,
because
yeah.
I always thought that you were the nicest, most honest, wonderful human beings, and now you've just dropped down to second after this interview, and
You
that's
didn't
still a
mention
great
effusive.
spot.
Yes. No.
Two is good in that world.
Yeah. And as Mark mentioned, Phil is a TV writer, producer, creator, executive producer. He created Everybody Loves Raymond. He's the host of Somebody Feed Phil on Netflix, and he has now a very successful podcast called Naked Lunch. It was a lot of fun, like Mark said.
Wasn't it
And
a book, Naked Lunch, by
I think there was a
that?
Movie back in the
There was
day.
Naked City,
So
a
it's
TV
probably a
show, but
book.
there's Naked Lunch was by that. He was a heroin addict.
Hmm.
Can't remember. Okay,
Totally different story. That's not at all his podcast. No.
no.
And so it's a lot of fun. This is part one of two parts. In the first part, Phil talks about his relationship and his admiration of Norman Lear, Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, Dick Van Dyke. And we talk about Everybody Loves Raymond, his parents, and Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld. And he has a very funny story in part one about Jerry Seinfeld. So please do listen, and we hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I walked away from that interview with him just going, "Wow, that was." I laughed. It got a little emotional. The whole thing was a blowout in every great way possible. So enjoy, Phil Rosenthal. So Phil, thanks for being here, and good to see you. Welcome to You Don't Know Schiff.
Yeah, I was going to say, we just can't thank you enough. We know you're incredibly busy, literally traveling the world. So for you to find the time for us, we really do appreciate this.
Yes, but this is the only place in the world I can find you guys, so I'm happy to be
That's
here.
right. That's right. So how this happened was I saw you at the George Shapiro Memorial.
That's right.
And there was quite the event. George Shapiro, if people don't know, he's a manager, a very famous manager, handled Andy Kaufman in his day and Jerry Seinfeld and a ton of people. So they had the memorial, and we got a chance to see that night Norman Lear, Dick Van Dyke, and Mel Brooks, one after another, go up on stage. And
heavyweights. I mean, I had to speak that night. That's no little thing for me. That was nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I know you were. Is it nerve-wracking that you're on the same bill with those guys?
Yes, but at the same time, all those guys you've just mentioned, including George, including, the late great Carl Reiner, they've all made me feel like they're my Jewish uncles. They've always, from the beginning, ever since I got this phone call, I think it was season one of Raymond, that we were in the writer's room and somebody said, Norman Lear is on line one. I'm like, what? And I pick up the phone. He goes, Phil, I hear we're fans of each other. And I'm like, I don't know about you, but I'm a big fan of yours. I mean, who's ever had more influence than Norman Lear in the world of television? And he goes, we should have lunch. I said, okay. How's tomorrow at what was the Patina restaurant in the Valley?
Isn't that the name of it?
I'm like, no, it's called something else. I forgot the name. Doesn't matter. And I don't think it's there anymore. Anyway, he goes, if it's okay, a friend of mine wants to meet you too. And I show up at this place, and Norman Lear is sitting at a table with Carl Reiner.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And I dropped dead. But that point of the story is they made me feel like family immediately. They're so warm and so nice. And I don't know if you've met Dick Van Dyke or had the opportunity to talk to him, the sweetest, nicest guy in the world. Mel Brooks, when you can get him to go out, the sweetest, nicest man. And they're all like so Hamish and great. I just love them.
I agree. To see them all late '90s, Norman Lear, 100 years old, walk up on stage themselves is
Yes.
quite encouraging. And
It's encouraging. Yes, it's encouraging. And you have to think, if they can do it, what are you complaining about? Get up there, young man. Yeah,
I
right?
once took I once took Carl Reiner out for lunch. I took him to a kosher
Yeah,
restaurant,
yeah.
and it was incredible. To look at this guy, to spend the time with him. I mean, it was
Yes,
just
then you know what I'm talking about. He
yeah.
just made, there was no pretension. There was no, I'm a big star. I changed the face of comedy. There wasn't any of that. He's just a nice Jewish man.
Norman Lear is producing a show now at 100 years old with George Wallace. They're
Amazing.
doing yeah they're doing a show together,
Well,
which
he
is
doesn't stop. He's just, I mean, I've never met anybody like him.
right. So I just want to tell
And
you something.
Mel has History of the World Part 2. Come on.
Yeah,
That's
He's
right. Great show.
96. Yeah.
Him and Carl Reiner, they used to get together every night and watch Jeopardy together.
Oh, believe me, Mark, I wanted to do a documentary about their friendship. I wanted to start the documentary with them watching TV together in Carl's house as they did every night. They're both widowers. They had each other. They had each other for 70 years, something like that. And they would sit there, they would eat on TV trays. You can see a little bit of this on the Comedians in Cars episode.
Right,
Jerry got in there and filmed a little bit of this. But what happens right after that? Oh, and I said, what do you watch when you are watching TV? They said, we look for movies that have the word secure the perimeter in them. And slowly after dinner, Mel makes his way over to the couch where he promptly falls asleep. And then Carl goes up to bed. And in the morning, Mel has left. And they repeat it. They repeat it every night. In fact, it was on one of these evenings that Carl got up to go to the restroom. And that was it. So that it happened. It happened on Mel's watch. I mean, so sad. I can't imagine, seeing your best friend go right in front of you. I mean, that's just painful. But I would do the scene where they drift off to sleep and we go back in time and celebrate their careers separately and together, from Sid Caesar days, right? And beyond. And 2,000-Year-Old Man.
Same thing. I always imagine what it would have been like for George Burns when Jack Benny died.
That's right.
I mean, they spoke every day, supposedly forever.
They spoke every day. But did Jack pass away right in front of him?
Right.
I mean, there's something, I don't know, maybe it's beautiful that he was there.
Right.
Were those guys big influences on you growing up when you were younger?
Of course. When I heard the 2,000-Year-Old Man, I think I was 12 or 13. I'm like, oh my God, this is like my dad and his friends. This is my humor. I mean, for the first time, I'm hearing, stuff I can reference, stuff I know, that Jewish sensibility. I didn't think that was out there.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was used to watching TV. The Jackie Gleason show and the Honeymooners, which I loved, they didn't talk like this.
No.
Right? So this was like, it was like hours.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was the whole world's too.
Talk about a Jewish thing. One of the great moments in my life, I wrote on Mad About You, and Mel Brooks was on the last season of Mad About You.
That's right. So, Paul's a good friend of mine.
Terrific guy. And I talked to him a lot. So you've done a show, so Mel delivers a joke. They're taping the show Friday night, and he delivers a joke and it falls flat. So the executive producer, was it Vic at the time? I can't. So anyway, he goes, anybody?
Vic Levin?
Yeah, Vic Levin. And all the writers are there. And he goes, who's got something for him?
Yeah.
So I go, I raise my hand. I go, I think I got a joke. So Mel comes over to me and he goes, so what do you got? And he wants me to whisper because he doesn't want the audience to hear.
Yeah, sure.
And give it away.
Sure.
So I give it to him and he goes, he puts on that Jewish accent. I'll try it. Yeah. I'll give it a shot. So he goes and he delivers it, gets a huge laugh. And I don't remember what the setup was, but the punchline was, nobody has ever seen a live whitefish.
Great.
Right. So could you be more Jewish than Nobody's Ever Seen a Live
Great.
Whitefish? And they
It's
go
great.
up, and it was one of the highlights of my life.
It has to be. I love hearing this. This is such a great story. The line is hysterical. I had a similar experience with my father. My father and Ray Romano's father, we cast occasionally in Raymond as Peter Boyle's lodge buddies. Okay. And they were quite funny together. We wrote specifically for them to have a line or two each episode that they were in. And there was one particular scene where they were in the sauna. So all these 70 and 80-year-olds, including Peter Boyle, were with their towels and their tops off in the sauna. It wasn't pretty, but the whole bit was that Ray is in the sauna with the old guys and he likes it, and he's turning into an old guy himself, right? The more you spend with old guys, the more of an old guy you become. That was the bit. And the scene ends, and it was okay, but you know how it is. We huddle, the writers huddle, and try to top that
Right.
blow to the scene, the last line. And we're coming up with, different things. And all of a sudden there's a tap on my shoulder, and it's my father. And I say, "What, Dad, we're working." He goes, "I think I should have the last line." I said, what are you doing? Go get back over there. We're working here. This is not, I just think it would be funny. I said, "I'm sure it might be funny, Dad, but I don't know if you noticed the name of the show is not Everybody Loves Max, okay? So go back over there and I'm working." It's, And we got a line. We gave it to Peter Boyle or something, and it goes actually a little worse than the first line.
Right.
So now it's the challenge. How do we beat this thing? And I just happen to glance over, and I see my dad standing in the set, and he's looking at me like, "Well, I'm here." And I'm like, "Over there, don't look at me. I'm working. I'm busy." And now I'm like fuming because he just doesn't have any respect for the process or what we do, and he's just like, I can't stand it. It brings up everything from everywhere, right? So huddled, and Aaron Schur, the writer, comes over and he goes, "I think I have a last line." I said, "Great." He goes, "But I think it's for your dad." I said, "Well, we're not doing it. We're not doing that." He goes, "Why not?" I go, "Because that would mean he's right, and we can't have that." And we're trying to come up with it. I go, "All right, Aaron, what's the line?" He tells me the line. I go, "God damn it. All right." I go over to my father, and he goes, "Yes." I said, "I'm going to give you the last line. Here's the line." And he goes, "All right." And we do the scene, and the scene is that men are complaining. And Ray complains as one of them. He says, "I got up 3 times last night to pee." And my father says, "At least you got up." And it killed.
Sure.
And I said, "I have to say, Dad, you were fantastic." And he goes, "I told you."
At least you didn't ask for a bigger trailer.
Yeah, right. That was next.
Yeah, that was next.
He loved being there. He loved being part of it. He did a little bit of tumbling in the Catskills. Tumbling is, for those of you who might not know, a guy who either gets paid or gets a free room, maybe, or free food to go around where the old people are sitting at the pool and make them feel good. Do a little crowd work, the little spritzing, right, with the people. And he did that. And he was up at an amateur night in New Jersey at some club. Not that he was a tailor, but he loved this, and he truly was funny. And my mother was on a date with someone else.
Wow.
And said, "Oh, I like this guy." So I wouldn't be here if my dad wasn't funny.
Right.
So
wow.
You show us a lot of your parents in Somebody Feed Phil,
Yeah.
Max
Yeah.
and Helen. So
Yes.
how was that like growing up? Were they kind of what we see there, or is it a very different, when you were much younger?
They're exactly what you see there. That's why it's so good. Because listen, I did this documentary called Exporting Raymond. Okay, that the Russians called me after Raymond was over, and they said, "Would I come over there and help them turn my sitcom into Everybody Loves Kostya?" And I don't know if you know this, Mark, but this is a thing that
Yeah, right.
I'm sure Matt about you. Did they ever call you for that to go and help?
I know people who have done that, have gone
Who've
to
done
Russia
that?
and Japan.
That's right. So I said, yeah, I'll come. I'll do that if I can document the whole process. And so I did. And that it's a really funny comedy because of how much I suffered in my attempt to get them to listen to me. My family thinks it's the funniest thing ever because, big shot, you go over there, nobody cared about you. Nobody listened. It's you can see it on iTunes or Apple, Exporting Raymond. And I don't know if you've heard, the Russians are back in the news. So
Yeah.
it's relevant. So I started that movie by going to my parents' house with the documentary crew, okay? Because I wanted to show two things. One, where the inspiration for the parents on Raymond came from, actually, and they had been to Russia. So I thought I could kill two birds with one stone. They're going to tell me what to expect in Russia, and you get to see the parents. So, you film on location. People come, they mic my mother by putting a thing up the front of her blouse. She's, oh my. And my father's like, I have to wear this battery in my ass. What is this? And people come with big cameras and a boom mic. The point is that within 5 minutes, they were fighting with each other as if nobody was there.
Of course.
I don't know what that is. I don't think it's special just for them. They happen to be especially good at it, at forgetting that the camera's there. But I think it's why we see such horrible behavior on these reality shows, because people forget that this is going out to the world.
Right. I had the same relatives, my parents too.
Yeah.
I remember I went to see my Uncle Louis in Florida. It was his 55th wedding anniversary. So I said to him, Uncle Louis, congratulations, 55 years. He looks at me and goes, I didn't kill her yet. And then she fires back, go ahead and try. So,
wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. So your parents, as long as we're talking about them, they did not have an easy start in life.
No.
They were during the war in Europe.
Both born in Germany. My father and his family actually made it out after Kristallnacht, but they had to see that happen in their neighborhood. I remember my father at 12 remembers his mother saying, get away from the window, because they were throwing rocks and, they were lucky their building didn't get burned down, right? And they had some connection that they were able to make it out. My dad came to New York at 12, and within 2 months, he had his bar mitzvah in New York. And he spoke no English. He spoke German. He was a German citizen. My mother was not as lucky. She was captured with her mother and put in a concentration camp in France. Yes, the French had concentration camps. They weren't the specific death camps that we know about, but they were concentration camps, and people, of course, died because of the horrible conditions. And they survived that. And they made it to New York. My mother's boat after the war was turned away by America and lived 2 years in Cuba, which she said to her dying days were the happiest times of her life. She couldn't believe she went from Nazi Germany and France to tropical paradise, pre-Castro, right? In the 50s. So actually late 40s, yeah.
Because it's always fascinating, because they came from these terrible conditions.
Yeah.
And so did they talk about it, or did humor?
Yes.
Was that sort of a coping mechanism for them? How did it all kind of play out in your childhood?
Humor was the currency of the house. When we weren't yelling, we were laughing, and we loved laughing. We also, a lot of yelling and a lot of screwed up residual trauma that I realized you don't know when you're a little kid what your parents are going through, and quite honestly, you don't care. When I was 10, I asked for the 3-speed Stingray bike that all the other kids got, and my mother, when I asked for that, said, "Oh yeah, you know what I got when I was 10? And a little kid doesn't care what his parents went through at 10. So it was like this oppressive thing
Sure. Were they
that
able
I
to?
certainly can't blame her for expressing.
No.
I'm far more sympathetic now as an adult than I was then. The kid just wants the bike. He doesn't want the story.
Did they buy German goods?
Never. Never. I had a German coffee maker when I was in my 20s in my house. I said, Ma, you want some coffee? She goes, oh, you have a Krupp's coffee maker. I said, yes. She said, you know what else they made? I said, no. She said, the ovens.
Right. Right.
So you want tea?
Right. I had the same thing. My parents would not buy any German, and then
Right.
or Japanese. They said, we sold them the steel, and then they made bombs and dropped it back on us. So that was
Yeah.
Japanese and German were
Yeah.
completely.
I understand. I do not hold that grudge now, but at the same time, I still haven't bought a Mercedes.
Mhm. I
So
didn't buy
how
one
is-
either, but somebody gave me one as a gift. So I got to be honest. And
By the way, Mark, it's a pretty nice gift. Who is that?
Mr.
Maybe I should be their friend.
Mr.
Who?
Mr. Seinfeld gave me one.
Wow.
Yes.
It's very generous.
You become friends with him, I'll tell him to give you a car.
That's so nice. Did he give you a piece of the show?
Not yet. No. I was just with him this last weekend at the Beacon Theater. We did 4 shows there in New York.
Oh, how great. Well,
And then-
say hi for me. I do really like him. And we have something that like a pet thing that we love to death, and it's the Malibu Kitchen. Have you ever
Sure,
eaten there with
of
him?
course, yeah,
Yeah.
I have.
And
by
now
the
it's
way-
closed, but it will reopen.
I just
Yeah,
went
no-
there based on your recommendation, and I was
You did.
sad to see it was closed.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know, this is what's wrong with the world.
Yeah.
There's no respect for these institutions,
Yeah.
It's just get more money. But this is like, it defined that whole area for me.
Sure.
Yeah.
That was the only thing with a soul
Right.
left in that neighborhood, right? So it means a lot that
So, by the way, when we first started, you said say hello to Kathy
Yeah.
Heller, and then now you
Yes.
said say hello to Jerry. And
I say hello to a lot of people. Yeah.
now, do a lot of people tell you that because when you're famous, people always, I'm going to see Phil. Oh, say hello for me. How many hellos do you
Yes.
get from people all the time that people want to say hello to you that aren't able to reach you?
Well, I do this.
Jerry has told me, do not tell me hello from anybody. I don't want to hear all these hellos because every time I see him, I go, Steve Middleman says hello. This guy says hello. That guy says hello.
This is a thing with him and Larry. These kind of social rules that they have. It's so odd to me. Their whole personalities. I love them both, but they're the oddest socially. Don't you think? Jerry once invited me very kindly with George Shapiro to come and see his show in Vegas. And he has his comedian friends. Have you done this? I'm sure you've done this. You've opened for him.
Yeah, I've been on the road with him for 20 years.
So, but I didn't see you in Vegas. Do you do Vegas with him?
Yes, I do. I do Caesars. Yes, occasionally.
You do?
He has Mario Joyner in Caesars.
That's who I saw. Okay. So him and his friends, and we go, and George says, after the show, you want to get a picture with Jerry. I said, what do you mean? He goes, the VIP line, you can be on the line. I'm like, I don't need to be on the line to have a picture with Jerry. If I want to, I can take a selfie with Jerry if I want, but I don't need it. It's fine. He goes, get on the line. It's okay. I said, George, if you want me to go online and get a picture, I will, but I'm going to kiss him. He said, oh, don't do that. I said, I'm doing it. Do you want to see that picture?
Yeah.
I do. I do.
All right.
Just,
Keep talking. I'll try to find this.
So speaking of Larry David,
Yeah.
you were on an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, trying to have lunch with him, and it felt like you guys are sort of the most polar opposites. Is that sort of the vibe, and that was sort of the intention on that episode? That's hilarious.
Look at him. He can't stand it.
That is his actual reaction. And what Mark and Lowell are seeing is me hugging Jerry and about to kiss him on the cheek, and Jerry bracing as if he's getting the world's largest shot in his private parts.
Right.
He is wincing at the idea of anyone, first of all, hugging him, and then I'm coming in for the kiss. And I did follow through. I kissed him on the cheek. And I said, Jerry, that was for your own good. I needed to show you that you could live through that.
That's hysterical.
But that personality, right? That is exactly what you're talking about, Lowell. Same with Larry. That's why Larry has cast me a couple times in Curb, because he understands that I'm the opposite of him.
Yeah.
And that I am someone that you would avoid at a party if you're him.
Right.
Because I'm going to either hug him or invite him to be on my show.
Yeah, and you're relentlessly positive.
Exactly. So I'm very annoying to him.
Yeah.
Oh, this was funny. Mark, at George's memorial, they sat me next to Larry, okay?
Right.
Now, I don't really socialize with Larry. Larry doesn't socialize.
Right.
But I say, hi, Larry. And he goes, hey, we were just talking about you. I said, oh, yeah? He goes, yeah, we might have something for you this season. I said, that's great. I just said it like this. Oh, that's great. I'd love nothing more than to come back and bother you. That's exactly what I said. And he goes, all right, don't get excited. I'm like, you brought it up. I didn't say. What did I say? I said something nice back to you for you being nice. And then I didn't hear from him. Not in this season because of that reaction. That I might be a little excited about doing it. I can't have that energy. I can't have it. It's too much.
Look at you screwed yourself out of $900.
You're right. And a day on the set with this curmudgeon. I love him. He's so funny. Every word out of that man's mouth is an episode. At the first time I met Larry David, the 25 years ago, we're at a party. I say, oh, hi, it's nice to meet you. He goes, not hello. These are the first words out of his mouth meeting a new person. He goes, you think it's all right to throw gum in the fireplace? It's an episode.
I worked with him every night for 5 years
Yeah.
at the Improv when we first started. And
Oh, my God.
the worst comedian in the world to follow. Because
he burned it down. He hated the people. They hated him.
Yeah. And he was
Scrovan, you know Steve Scrovan. He tells me
I know
stories
well, of
about
course.
those days. Yeah.
And Larry would just throw the mic on the floor and go, I've had it. I can't do this. And you had to follow him. But everybody would go in the room and see what he was going to do that night. It was always exciting.
Yes, very exciting. Yeah. The guy who doesn't care what the audience thinks is so great. That's, Andy Kaufman, you wanted to see. Or Andy Kindler, another great, who is funniest when he's bombing.
Right. I used to see him at the Montreal Comedy Festival. He'd be he would do that speech.
The State of the Union. Doesn't care what bridges he's burning. Does not. Fearless. Right.
Well, there was another comic. Do you know Barry Diamond?
I know that name.
He loved to dig himself in such a hole to see if he could get out of it.
Yeah.
He would just keep digging it like a grave, jump in, and then try to just come back alive. And he would do it. It was amazing how some of these comics had the courage to do that sort of thing.
It is probably the bravest thing that you guys do. The bravest thing in the world is I tried it when I was 19 at an amateur night in Nyack, New York at a jazz club. And I was the comedian in between the trumpet and the saxophone player. And, that I still have flop sweat when I think about it because there were 3 or 4 tables in the front and then the bar was right there. And the people at the bar are talking the whole time. And I'd been in the school plays where they sit and watch you. I was not used to this. I said, this is not for me. I'm not doing this ever again. And I never did.
We've all done those rooms where there's a bar in the back and they put the blender on while you're doing your set. Like you're going in, anyway, I'm on my way.
Isn't it a disaster? It's so terrible. I don't know how you do it. But now they're paying to see you, Mark.
That's unbelievable.
You've made it.
Who
it's
knows?
Great.
You make it. So you talk about this thing. You're like one of the luckiest people in the world.
I am the luckiest. You're never going to have anyone on this podcast luckier than me. I know it.
I hear you. How do you warrant this? How does this happen?
How do I warrant it?
I mean, like these events.
A life of sacrifice. I can honestly say I earned it. After Raymond, which also, is enough luck for one person,
Mhm.
I found the business had changed greatly. And my sensibility was just not welcome. They just wanted me to be hip and edgy, just be more hip and edgy. I blame Friends for this. I blame Friends, a great sitcom, but what was wrong with Friends is that the studios thought, yes, just get young people and be a little more hip and edgy, and we'll have Friends. No, you had Friends because the Friends were on Friends.
Mhm.
Right.
That was one of the rare instances where the young, beautiful people were also funny. God doesn't always give with both hands.
Right.
And so, in a way, it helped ruin the business, not because of Friends itself, but because of the executives who thought if you imitated it, that's all you needed.
Mhm.
And so that's the death of everything,
So did
right?
you try to get another show on the air after Raymond?
Every year. Every year I'd write one or two or sometimes three
It's it's
pilots.
it's
And after
mind-boggling.
years of that, I walked into my agent's office and I said, I've had this in the back of my mind for a long time, food and travel show. Well, they looked at me as if I pooped on the carpet.
Right.
They're like, what are you talking about? You're supposed to make sitcom. I'm like, I understand, but it's not going well. And I don't understand what's happened to the business. But if I'm going to bang my head on this show business wall, why don't I pick this spot in the wall that I might really like?
Mhm.
So let me give this a shot. And they said, where would you do this? Who would want this? I said, well, I was thinking PBS. They said, PBS? Why don't you just burn the building down? There's no money at PBS. Why would you say PBS to us? I said, because on PBS, I might be hip and edgy. And so they said, well, you're not going to PBS. If you insist on doing this idiotic idea, at least let's go to a place that does this. I said, where? They said, the Travel Channel. I said, oh, okay. I'm not stupid. Let's go there. You're going to think I'm making this up. I meet with the president of the Travel Channel. And he says to me, we've done some research and we found our audience doesn't really like travel.
Oh, unbelievable. Yeah.
I said, oh my, what are you going to do? He said,
What are you going to do?
yes, right. He goes, we do shows that are travel adjacent. I said, what the hell does that mean? He says, oh, we're going to do like this year. We have a show called Pimp My RV. He says, you understand? I said, I think I do. You're going to pimp an RV, but you're not going to go anywhere? He goes, that's right.
Pre-travel, yeah.
So we go go on the way out of that office. I said, can I go to PBS now? They go, no. Now we go to the Food Network. Okay. The Food Network is owned by the same people who own the Travel Channel. And the president of Food Network says to me, we're kind of getting away from the food thing.
Unbelievable.
We're going to do shows that are food adjacent. Like they had a meeting, a corporate meeting that
Sure.
week, and came up with the word to save them, adjacent. So meaning at the Food Network, they're going to have competition shows
Mhm.
where,
Sure.
it is a food, but the real thing is the chefs fighting and the competition. Okay, goodbye. By the time I walked into PBS after Raymond was over, was 10 years
Wow.
of trying to get this on. Now, I did other things. I did that documentary that I mentioned. I wrote a book about my experience in life and how it turned into Raymond. I had some other things, but I kept pitching this food and travel show to everyone who would listen. And 10 years after having the idea to do it, I walked into PBS, but I was ready. And I sold the show with one line. I said, I'm exactly like Anthony Bourdain if he was afraid of everything.
Wow. Yeah. There's the pitch.
That was it. And they said, we've been looking for a food and travel show with humor for years. And that's how I got the show. And that we lasted one season on PBS. Why? They don't have money.
Right.
And then Netflix came along, changed the title. And now we're going into our 7th season on Netflix.
And it's a wonderful show. It's mind-boggling
Thank
to me
you.
that after the success of Raymond,
Yes.
that didn't count.
Didn't count. No, it's all about what's hip now, what'll look good. People forget when you hear that this network turned you down, or this studio, or this streaming service. It's not the service, it's the person. There's an executive who wants certain things on their resume, right?
Mhm.
It's not about, it's more about the person and what they want than about, unless they're being dictated to by a corporate overlord that says
Right.
only shows with this in it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which is possible. But a lot of the time, it's the executive either not wanting to buck the system or take a chance on something, or he wants his legacy. And this really, you've worked in TV, so you know what I'm talking about. The skewing of the shows for young people is actually not good business. Why? Because more people are our age watching TV than the kids,
Sure.
right?
Of course.
But the executives want young on their resumes
Mhm. Wow.
so that they can get the next job
'Cause
or appear hip and edgy.
right. Because
I'm sure
I
you've
was
had this
frustrated.
experience where you're watching TV and you go, how did this happen? How did this get on? How is this possible? This is the
Yes.
worst thing I've ever seen.
Yes. Because it tested well. It tested well with the exact audience that they want on their resume.
Yeah.
I once said to a president of a network who asked my opinion about a certain show, why would you put this on? He said, well, it tested very well. I said, can I ask you that? No offense to anybody in the room. And the head of testing was in the room. But did we ever test the testing? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, 99% of the shows that make it on the air tested very well. And 99% of them crap out after 2 episodes. So you ever test the testing? And they just looked at me with blank faces. No, they don't test the testing. You know why? Because it's not about the real testing. It's about ass covering. We
Mhm.
test things so that it's not our fault.
Right.
Why did you put that shit on? What? It wasn't me. The testing was so positive. It was the people. The people. It wasn't me.
Right.
Yeah,
Let
without
me-
revealing too much, when I watched Exporting Raymond, I was very frustrated on your behalf. um, but
The
yeah,
point of exporting Raymond is that you get the same no here in America, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
we could laugh at the Russians. No, it's the exact same. You make the same humorless heads of comedy here.
yeah.
Did it get harder when you're putting a sitcom together? Does
Yeah,
it get harder every year to do it because the stories are you have less stories? Did you get more stories? Eventually, they seem to run out of steam, right?
that's why we left. We left on our terms after 9 seasons. Actually, I wouldn't even do a full 9th season. I said I only have stories for this many. They go,
Mhm.
well, what do you mean? You'll think of more? No, I've already thought of 210.
Yeah.
That's enough of anything. They don't understand that.
Right.
They were like, they actually said to me, if you leave, you can leave, but if as long as I have the actors, the president of the network said this to me. As long as I have the actors, I'm doing the show. Meaning, what I do doesn't matter. The writing doesn't matter to them.
And we know that
It's the only thing.
Yeah, of course.
It's
If it's
the
not on,
only thing.
you know the saying, if it's not on the page, it's not on the stage.
Of course.
You know, by the way, I just heard an interview with Buster Keaton, Studs Terkel interview.
My favorite.
I love
Oh
Buster.
my God.
He's one of those I wish I spent 20
Yes,
minutes
I wish
with.
I knew him. Yes.
So Studs Terkel says, is it hard to come up with new comedy ideas? Keaton goes, impossible. Now, this is the greatest comedian probably that ever lived. And he goes,
Right.
you wouldn't believe how hard this is. It's,
Yeah, because he did it all.
yeah.
Now what? You've done it for so many years. You defined the genre of slapstick comedy, right?
Right.
Who's better? Nobody.
Nobody.
I urge all your listeners to go on YouTube and just look at a highlight reel of Buster Keaton. Take you 5 minutes. You won't believe what you're seeing. He was the Tom Cruise of his day. He did all his own stunts and stuff that they would never even let Tom Cruise do.
That's right.
And he broke every bone in his body, by the way.
That's right. He broke his neck and worked for years with a broken neck and didn't know it was broken until he went for insurance to do a movie. And the guy goes, when did you break your neck? He goes, well, that's what I did years ago.
That's right.
I just saw a movie he did the other day called Seven Chances. And
Great.
great.
It's great.
The last, like you said, the audience should go at least to the last 15 minutes and see him running with
Yep.
these rocks and boulders and things.
Following him.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's insane.
Physical genius on a scale that's never been matched.
Totally, and never will again. So I have to tell you, I realize my wife and I, we watch the food show religiously,
He,
and pizza. So I'm going to give you
yeah,
an insight you may not know.
please.
Okay, so people talk about New York pizza being so great,
Yeah.
and I have the reason. It's not the water, which you've talked about. So you ever watch these pizza guys? They're in there. It's what? How hot is it in the pizza place when they're cooking?
Very.
Very hot. So these Italian guys, they wipe their hands to
Oh,
sweat,
no.
and then they throw it in the dough. That's the secret to New York pizza.
Thanks. Now I'll never eat it again. That's really funny. Listen, wherever you can get flavor.
One more question going back to Raymond. So in You're Lucky You're Funny, your book, you
Yeah.
talk a lot about how impossible it was to get off the ground, any sitcom. In there, you mentioned there were 3 occasions where you drew the line and said, I'm going to quit the show.
True.
And it was sort of like a real eye catcher when you did that. And so just curious, looking back, would
Yeah.
you, if you had to play it out again, would you have done that? Like drawn the line so
Yes.
firmly where you
Yes,
did?
I had to. So I wouldn't do it for any show,
Mhm.
but this I was literally writing about my family.
Mhm.
And I had 5 years experience writing on other people's shows, but this one was mine.
Mhm.
Yes, it was based loosely on Ray Romano's life, his actual life, meaning he really had twin boys, an older daughter, parents who lived close by, and a older brother who was jealous of him. But what I didn't know about their specific personalities, I filled in with the personalities from my family. So here's the first time in my life that I'm writing about my life.
Mhm.
And they didn't know my life better than me. I'm sorry.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that you quit because your iced tea isn't cold enough. You pick the spot where you've now gone too far and you're going to fundamentally change the show. And when you do that, it's not going to work.
Mhm.
I know it's not going to work. And there were 2 instances. One was I was told that the president of the network wanted a specific actress who was not right for the part of the wife on the show.
Mhm.
And so I was quitting over that.
Mhm.
I was able to talk my way out of that, but I was quitting. Meaning I was able to talk to the head of the network, and he backed off.
Yep.
But that day I walked in quitting. I was going to quit if he wouldn't relent.
Right.
So that was one. And the second time was the show got picked up to go to series. And my agent called me and he said, congratulations, it's going to series. I said, oh, that's wonderful. And he says, they just want to know who's going to run the show. And I said, I assumed me. And they said, you? Why would they let you run the show? You've never run a show before. I said, well, I made the pilot, right? And he said, yeah. So I'll do more like that. And he said, you don't understand. Pilot is one thing. This is now a multi-million-dollar investment because they're, going to buy, 13 episodes or whatever. I said, oh, well, if I'm not running the show, then I quit. He goes, what do you mean quit? Why are you always quitting? I said, because I'm not going to work for someone else on my own show. That person will make all the decisions and they're going to dilute what the show should be. I know what the show should be. I'm writing about my family. This doesn't happen in any other industry. Well, I don't get it.
Right.
So I quit. I'm not doing it. He goes, don't get so excited. Let me make a phone call. He makes a phone call and he calls me back and he says, good news. They're going to let you co-run the show with someone who has experience running a show. And I said, oh, if you put it that way, I quit. He said, why? I said, because this is just a ruse to get me to work for someone else on my own show. Because that person had experience running a show before, he's making all the decisions. He's the one who's going to run the show. And I will be relegated to number 2 on my own show. No, thank you. And I didn't do it out of ego. I did it because I've seen this before, and I know that the vision of the show was so specific and so personal, right?
Sure.
That it would be compromised beyond where I could tolerate it.
Right.
It would be homogenized into Full House or whatever else they wanted to do with the show. And so I quit. And I hung up that phone, and my wife said, "Why are you sad?" I said, "I think they're going to go on and do the show without me."
Wow.
And the phone did not ring. It didn't ring that day, the next day, or the next day. On the third day, the phone rang. My agent, the head of the network, is going to let you do the show, going to let you run the show. I said, "Really? Wow. Why?" And he said, "It's because he liked how you handle the thing with the casting." So he remembered that maybe I had a little bit of integrity, which is unusual, I guess, in these situations. Because usually you do anything to get the show on. Doesn't matter. Give them whatever they want. Just get the show on. And then you think, once it's on, then I can do what I want. No, you're dead. The best advice I ever got was from Ed Weinberger. Did you know him at all, Mark?
I didn't know him, but I know of him, of course.
I'm writing the pilot for Raymond. I asked for advice from him. He says, "Man, do the show you want to do, because in the end, they're going to cancel you anyway."
Right.
Best advice I ever got in my whole friggin' life.
Mm-hmm.
We all get canceled one day. So live your life, right? That's what that means.
Okay. Phil Rosenthal, part 1. We got a part 2 coming up very soon. I re-listened to that, and it was fantastic. Let me just tell the people how I got Phil to come on the podcast. I was at the memorial for George Shapiro, who's Jerry Seinfeld's manager, Andy Kaufman's manager, so many great comedians. And George had passed on, and Phil was at the memorial, and I went over to him, and I knew him a little bit, not a lot. And I said to him, "Hey, Phil, got a podcast, and I'd love for you to come on." You know what he said? "Fine."
Fine. I like this.
Yeah. He said, "Good." And he gave me his phone number, his email, and he was a man of his word. He didn't have to come on.
No, he was very, very generous with his time, and it was a lot of fun. He's just
the first time, if you remember, we were supposed to have him live in studio, and we bought all this food.
It was a little miscommunication.
A little misunderstanding, and he couldn't make it. And you and I sat there, and we put on 10 pounds.
10 pounds, yeah. And in part 1, Phil talks about the old greats, Norman Lear, Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks, and how they're all Hamish and great guys. And so I feel like Phil is definitely in that category. So it was very generous of him to spend this much time with us. And it was great. And we hope our listeners enjoyed it as well.
Thank you.
And check out the show notes if you want to see more about Phil, all of his amazing projects, and his book that's for sale. Somebody Feed Phil the cookbook, and all of his proceeds go to charity. So thanks again.
How does he sell a cookbook? He'd never cooked anything his entire life. He goes from restaurant to restaurant all over the world. They cook for him.
Well, that's what he said. He doesn't make any of the recipes. He puts together recipes of other people.
Sly guy, isn't he?
Sly. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. I didn't really mean that. You're still number 1, by the way. I just said it, because to build
just
that
to get
up.
a laugh.
But you always were, and you always will be number 1 in my book.
Isn't that a country song?
Don't you wish your wife talked to you like that and your kids?
She does, but it's not the good book.
Yeah.
It's the book you don't want to be in.